long time ago, long enough to be a whole other world. Ten had brought her own guitar and the promise of lessons, the inevitable conclusion to a year of hardcore flailing over Taylor Swift's 1989. The cake was an Oreo cheesecake hastily bought from the bakery in town because Opa had forgotten the cake she was baking in the oven and it had burned all black, filling the house with acrid smoke. They'd laughed then. "A silly mistake," Opa had said, tears in her eyes from giggling over it all. "Just one of those things." That was the year her grandmother began using sticky notes to remind her of things. "I'm a little forgetful these days," she'd say, with a wave of her hand. "Allah, you know lah how it is with us old people." But as the year turned, it was clear the burnt cake was only a glimpse of what was yet to come. Hamra's 11th birthday was the year everyone forgot about presents, because in the middle of laying the table for her favorite meal, nasi ayam, and if she tried hard enough she could still smell the chicken roasting in the oven, bearing the faded sticky note instructing, "This is hot. Do not touch when light is on." Just one note in a forest of notes. They realized that Opa was missing. She'd walked right out of the house, with the cake Hamra and her mother had helped her bake, without her shoes. They found her at the edge of the jungle, feet covered in mud. "I'm taking it to my mother," she'd said crossly. "It's her favorite, Victoria sandwich." At that point, Opa's mother had been dead for over a decade. They brought her home and cleaned her feet, placing Band-Aids carefully over half a dozen tiny cuts from where Opa had stepped, unseeing, on rocks or thorns. Later, Hamra dug a fork into the cake and ate one single bite. It was delicious, and somehow that made her cry even more. For her 12th birthday, Hamra got a generic grocery store chocolate cake and her very own phone. Her parents did not explain why, only that, "You're old enough to have one now." But 12-year-old Hamra understood things that 11-year-old Hamra might not have. 12-year-old Hamra knew adults said things even when they didn't really say them. The phone was so her parents could make sure they always knew where Opa was. It was so that they knew she was taking care of Opa properly when they weren't home to do it. Hamra thought about all of this. She thought about the pandemic and about her parents and their worried faces, pale with exhaustion. Then she looked over at Minnie. Some of the black had rubbed off her nose. Hamra had spent the past year or so lobbying hard to have it thrown out so it could be replaced with something sleek and cool, something befitting an almost teenager. But all her impassioned reasoning had fallen on deaf ears. Ayah had merely said, "We don't waste money replacing things that still work perfectly well." And so, that was that. "Maybe we don't need any surprises this year," Hamra said to Minnie. Minnie just smiled her wide plastic smile. Tick. At 7:34 a.m., Hamra sat, washed and dressed, at the breakfast table, nibbling on toast slathered in Nutella and waiting for someone to wish her a happy birthday. The waiting and the nibbling occupied her enough so that she paid no attention at all as Atuk talked about something. There was a time when Hamra would have listened eagerly as her grandfather told his stories, no matter how many times she'd heard them before. But that was before the virus and the lockdown that had kept them all in their homes for the past month. Well, all of them except for her parents. "And so, to this day, the tiger still seeks his revenge." Atuk raised his arms and grimaced, baring his teeth in what would have been a decent impression of a tiger's fierce snarl, if not for the fact that his dentures chose that precise moment to slide out of his mouth and fall straight into his mug. Hot milky tea puddled in the creases and curves of the plastic-laced printed tablecloth that never would lie flat no matter how many times Hamra smoothed it down. Great. Without saying a word, Hamra got up to get the rag they always kept by the sink, a tiny flame of irritation shooting up from deep within her belly and nipping away.